So I have 5 Eastern, so I'm going to get started. So I hope there are people there. I guess I can't really figure that out until Galen tells me that there actually are people listening to me. So my name is Sue Hanley, and I am going to talk about SharePoint news. So before we get started, let's go through a few of our prep slides. So hopefully we will all be back together in person in March of 2021. And I, for one, am really looking forward. I'd love to thank all of our really generous sponsors for helping make this event possible. I don't think any event would be possible without sponsors, so thank you very much. There is a raffle. Here it is. 5 correct answers on this bit.ly in order to win. Hope you guys all win, or at least 5 of you do. And please give it consideration to donating to the following charity relief funds if you are so inclined. So again, I'm Sue Hanley. I'm going to talk to you today about SharePoint news. So first thing I want to start with is a sobering fact to begin our discussion. Your corporate news articles are just not getting read. We confuse people. We confuse what people have clicked on, which gets a view count, so it makes it look like people are reading, with what people have actually read and taken action on. They're not the same things. We make a mistake by assuming that when people click on our articles, they're actually reading them. So how do I know that? Because there's a lot of data that tells us that people just don't read online. They barely read the top of your page, and they certainly don't read all the way through. So whether your page is an article, a news article, or a regular page, these cold hard facts give us something to think about as we're creating content designed to engage. And the reason we're doing that is because we know that people don't read on the web. We skim and we scan. And that really means that we need to not just create news articles. Just creating a news article is not going to get the engagement outcomes we want. We need to write articles that our readers are going to connect with. They're going to want to read more, and they're going to want to take action. So think of SharePoint News as a content distribution system that works across the spectrum of personal and team organizational news. It helps you get your content across to all kinds of different audiences and applications. And one of my favorite things about news, of course, is that it's dynamic. Unlike newsletters, which are usually about things that happened in the past, news allows us to talk about things that are happening now. And a very cool feature that is going to roll out soon, and I am really waiting for this one, is the ability to schedule when a news post goes live. And actually that scheduling feature is not going to just apply to news, because news is just a page with a specific objective. So scheduling pages are going to happen soon for all different types of pages. So let's talk a little bit about where can people see news. One place people can see your news is at the SharePoint Start page. That SharePoint Start page is your personalized view of what's going on around you. The feed is powered by the Microsoft Graph, and this is what includes. It includes your top 20 followed sites, the sites that you visit all the time, news from the sites you visit all the time, news from sites that the people you work with visit, and people in the chain of command that you're involved in. You can see news on team sites, communication sites. You can roll all the news up on a hub or display news posted to the hub site. You can display SharePoint news in Microsoft Teams, and of course, the mobile app. So let's talk about what you can do to make sure that your news articles actually get read. And my favorite technique for this to increase engagement is to designate one or more sites as being your official sources of news. Now, this can be done using some very simple PowerShell. And believe me, it's simple because I had to learn PowerShell to make hub sites. And I always tell people, PowerShell, it's easy enough that a grandmother can do it. So one thing that that happens when you designate an organizational news site is that the posts from that site get that little cool banner, the one that looks at news at Contoso. So that banner flags your article as being, I'm important, I'm coming from an organizationally relevant site. And what's kind of neat about that little banner is it changes color based on the theme of the site where it appears. So let's talk a little bit about how you can create news articles. So news is available on team sites and communication sites. Communication site news is probably going to reach the widest audience. So for the most part, that's what I'm going to talk about today. But news is news. You have the same capabilities in your team site that you do in your communication site. So the first thing you decide when you're creating news is, when you're making the decision to add news to your site, is where am I going to show, from where am I going to pull the news? What's the source of my news? Now, by default, on a hub, the source of the news is all sites in the hub. But on an individual communication site, the source of news is the site that you're on. But the superpower ability to roll up news does not only apply to hubs. You can select the news from any site that you have access to and have that roll into the site that you're on. One thing to note is that when you are rolling up news, the news from the sites that are not yours are based on search. So don't expect the news that you publish on another site to necessarily show up immediately in your site, but I promise you it will. So the cool feature is you don't need to be part of a hub to roll out news. But previously, until about 2 weeks ago, when you were collecting news from multiple sites, you did not have access to the filter, the ability to filter news based on a title or based on an attribute on that site. Well, that little feature snuck in to news a couple of weeks ago, and now, even in a news roll-up, you have this simple filter to select the content that you would like to see. So really, really cool. So the other decision you make for news is, what is it going to look like? So by default, team sites get the top story layout. Communication sites get the side-by-side layout. And again, you can change this based on the story you want to tell. And hub news gets the hub news layout. The most current, or the latest feature of news is what Microsoft calls the tiles layout. And anytime I can have a gratuitous picture of my granddaughter in a slide deck, you know I'm going to do that. And so what you're seeing in this example is what looks like the hero web part, but it's actually a dynamic view of up to 5 articles of news in the tile layout. And so you can see exactly what would this look like in the tile layout, and then the same exact collection of 5 stories, or in this case 4 stories, in the top story layout. So I actually tend to use the top story layout the most, and the reason for that is it looks great in a 2/3 column, and it takes up the minimal amount of vertical real estate. And while I really believe that if you're adding news to your site, you want to keep it on top, as close to the top, because you want it to be dynamic, you also don't want news itself to necessarily obscure the other great content on your page. You have options with the news web part to show or hide different attributes of those articles. So this, again, we didn't originally have these capabilities when news first came out, and people were really asking, well, can I not show the number of views on an article? Can I show or not show the author of a news article? And so the answer is yes, you have the ability to do that as well. The other really phenomenally cool way to ensure that your news articles engage is to target news to a particular audience. This is actually a multi-step process, and I'm going to walk through the steps. I'm providing the slides so that you can see how you do it. So step 1 is you need to have a group, and these are the 3 kinds of groups that you can use to target news. Step 2, and this one really threw me initially, is that you have to go to the site pages library, go to audience targeting settings, which, by the way, is a classic setting and always was there. I would have never thought to go to a classic setting and check the box that says enable audience targeting. So I'm going to demo some of this, but this prep part I forgot to put in my demo. So just understand that before you can target anything, any page, you have to enable audience targeting in the Site Pages library. Step 3 is you have to have a web part that respects targeting. And there's a couple, so not just news, but also highlighted content. And so you can, then you're going to turn on audience targeting on that little switch, enable audience targeting in the news web part. And then of course, the last part is to create pages and target those pages. So imagine that you have pages that are targeted and you add the news web part to your site. If you do not also enable audience targeting in the web part itself, the audience for those news articles doesn't know what, there's no acting on that audience. So it's important that you do all of those steps. Turn on audience targeting, show it in the web part, and then add the audience to the page. And if you do that, you can see that you get 2 options on news. So you notice the article that has Hollywood as the logo. That is showing because that article was targeted to people on the California team. Just like audience targeting in classic SharePoint, targeting is not the same as security. So when you target an article, it will not be visible in these web parts. But if someone searches for content that's on that page and the page is not itself secured, they will be able to find the content. So think of audience targeting as a way to increase the relevance of the content to me, your user, and that actually helps make your content more engaging. Just in case you are interested in knowing what's the maximum number of articles I can show on a page, it really depends because it depends on 2 things, the kind of layout that you're using and the column width where you place the layout. So you can experiment with moving things around, trying different layouts, and seeing what experience you're creating for your user. So you have a lot of options, and all of this is out of the box. It allows you to help display your news article in a context that will make the most sense for your users. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the 2 types of news articles that you can create. So the first kind is what I'm going to call roll your own. And so create a news post is just a page. It happens to have a specific metadata attribute that helps you know that it is news, and that is the promoted state attribute. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but the one tip I have for everyone is always make sure that you are displaying promoted state in the default view of your Site Pages library, and that will help you tell which pages are news and which pages are not news. I like to make the all pages view the default view of the Site Pages library. Display version, because that tells you whether the page is published or not. If it ends in .0, it is. If it ends in anything else, it's not. And I like to show promoted state, and then I often group by promoted state so that I can quickly identify news pages, which are promoted state equals 2, from site pages, which are promoted state equals 0. So let's go back to our 2 kinds of posts. So a news link and a news post. The news link means you are going to, it will take as a parameter the URL of the page that you want to show. It can be anything. It can be something on your SharePoint tenant, or it can be any article that you find on the web. If there is a high quality image in that article, the news link will automatically pull that beautiful image into the link. You can edit the title, and then it'll give you a little bit of a story that you can also edit. When you click post, that news link looks just like any of the articles that you posted on your own, but when you click on the link, it takes you to that destination. If you want to go edit anything about the news link, if you wanted to edit something about your news post, you go to the page and you put it in edit mode just like any other page. To edit the context or the description or the image on a news link, you have to go to the Site Pages library and open the page from the Site Pages library, and you'll get a prompt that looks very much like what I'm showing right here. Okay, there's one thing that did not originally come out when we got news that every Corp Comms person really wanted, and we can do now, and that is to pin a news article in a prominent position so that all the other articles float around it. A lot of the organizations that I'm working with pinned a link pinned their COVID-19 intro or introductory news page in that prominent first position in news, and then other news kind of floated in last published is on top order after they did that. I will tell you that I find the news organization experience the least intuitive thing in all of SharePoint, so I'm going to demo that. Just so you know, I pre-recorded all my demos because I didn't want to have to pay the tax to the demo gods, and I'm just going to hope that they all work. So let's look at a few different things you can do in news, and then after the demos, we'll that those articles are super fantastic so that people will read them. So let's first talk about one feature that I think is really, really important, and that is if you want people to create news in a consistent way, I think you should create a news template. And in that news template, you can have some basic advice for your creators, your content authors, to help them create articles more effectively. You can do it from the new page area or in the news web part if you have edit permissions. A news page is just like any other kind of page, and you can pre-create templates that you want people to use. I like to embed all the instructions for the news page right into the template so that people know exactly what they're supposed to do. A little hint, another little hint, get your title in there first. And the reason you want to do that is if you're going to go add an image to your page, you need that title in the article before you add your first image so that the label for the folder in Site Assets is going to align with the name of your page. You can, I don't know if I can stop this, but you can see that you can choose from a lot of Microsoft stock images, but this is super cool, especially if your organization has brand police. You can have an entire library of organization assets. When I was recording this, I had a very slow internet day, and you can choose from your pre-approved branded assets that are for your organization and use them on your page. Add the image, scroll till you get the focal point, not quite exactly where you want it, adapt the template the way you want, and when you publish the news article, because it is on the site you're on, it will immediately show up. One of the things you should be aware of is that the first couple of sentences are what will show up in the description for that news article. When you first create your page, you're not going to actually see what those are. They'll show up in page details. But after you create the news article, some of the views, not all of them, show a brief snippet of text for the news web part, and you want to make sure that you are editing that or controlling that so it looks like something that you care about. So one of the things I'll just give you my hint is I use templates for every type of page on my sites, but especially news, to encourage people to follow best practices for writing news articles. All right, let's try another demo and see if my slide advancements will work. All right, this is going to play this again. All right, so here's another really cool feature. So I want to demo this one because this really confused me a lot when it first came out. So let's look at this news organization thing. So I've got a whole bunch of different news web parts on this page because it's my little news demo site, but let's pick the one we want to organize. And honestly, I don't want to be reminded about virtual conferences forever. So what I want to do is I want to go down, scroll down until where I see organize. And I'm going to say, obviously, the most important thing is anything about Sue's granddaughter. And I'm going to drag that article over to that prime position. You can see I can use those up and down arrows to move it around. And when I X out of that, you can see that Hannah gets top billing and virtual conferences move over to the right. Now, what will happen is the next article that gets posted is going to show up on top of virtual conferences. That picture of the coffee is going to move down, and Hannah is walking everywhere is going to move off to the see all area. So news articles actually never die. They just move to the archive automatically. So no requirement to actually create a news archive because you'll get that automatically. Another really cool feature, and again, this is not just specific to news, but very often we share edit responsibilities with a bunch of people, and we want to see what did people edit. Now this feature got added to support multilingual, but you can actually use it for anything. So let me show you how you can look at what's changed on any page. So the first thing you're going to do is look at page details. You're going to scroll to the bottom and look at version history. And then at the top, if you click highlight changes on this page, you can see what were the edits made to your page and who edited it and when did they do it. So this is really a cool capability for all pages, and oftentimes we want to do this for news. And one really important reason you would do this is if you're creating multilingual pages. All right, so again, along this one, I'm going to show you a little bit about targeting. I'm just going to demo that fully, but again, assume that step one is we go to the site pages library. We go to library settings. We go to audience targeting settings and we check the box to enable audience targeting. If you don't do that, none of this is going to work. None of the magic will happen. So that's step one. Step two is that we have to make sure that we enable targeting on the news web part itself. So I'm going to put the page in edit mode and I'll just show you that in the news web part, hold on, so there we go. We're going to turn on audience targeting. So that means that if I have an article that has an audience associated with it, like this one, again, have to show pictures of that baby. If I target this one to only people who are in California and publish this page, if the web part has audience targeting enabled, it will not be seen. If the web part does have, if web part has targeting enabled, it will only be seen to people who are members of the California team. If the web part, if the article is targeted, but the web part doesn't have targeting enabled, everyone is going to see the article. So you have to do all of the steps or targeting isn't going to work for you. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at the ability to filter news. So as I said, one thing that's new is that we recently got the ability to filter a news article, even if we're pulling in content from multiple sites. We've always been able to pull in filter news articles when we're only sourcing the news from the site that we are on, but we can now filter news no matter where it comes from. So one way to filter news is to create a set of tags in your site pages library, tag your news, and then in this case, the travel news is filtering on just news that have travel in the news category. So again, let's look at the steps to do this. So site contents. I'm an information architect, I should explain that. So I never do local columns. Every column to me has to be a site column. So I've set up a site column called news type, and you can see that I've tagged things with just a few things that are important to me. I've also done a little color coding magic so that if I'm looking at this is probably not something you would do in a pages librarian normally, but just wanted to show that little trick off. Okay, so I'm going to put the page in edit mode. And in this news web part, I'm going to say filter where page properties, where news type equals travel, and bingo, all the travel articles show up. Until recently, we could only filter across sites using the highlighted content web part. Highlighted content has some nifty capabilities because we can do a more sophisticated query and pull things in based on other attributes. But here in this news web part, I am pulling in content from 3 of the same sites as the highlighted content web part above, and I'm saying show me news where the title includes the word Hannah, and give it a second and the magic happens. And you can see that the same articles show up in the news web part as we're showing up in the highlighted content web part, with one exception. And that's because that last article was not part of the scope that I selected for the news web part. So it's pretty sophisticated, and this is actually one of my really favorite features. And I have a lot of clients that were really desperately waiting for that. The next thing I want to show you is how to kill your newsletters. So newsletters for me are not news. They're about things that happened in the past that I may have been interested if I knew about them when they happened, but because newsletters tend to be produced in PDFs, and by the time you get them, the news is long past, they're not really news anymore. So they're just letters. So what I love about the News Digest is news should be published as it happens. But maybe not everyone's following my site and reading everything. I can email a News Digest to any group of people that I want to. So I get like this shopping cart of articles by clicking the See All. I go new, I say next page. It is just a page. What I love to do about this is after I've created my News Digest, what I'm going to do is go back to that page and tag it with metadata that says, I'm a News Digest. That way, I can go and create a page that shows only News Digest. So I can create a roll-up of the digest to look at things after the fact. And so just in case that Sue Hanley misses this email that I'm about to send to her, she can go back to the site and find all those legacy News Digests. This was actually really critical for me to get one of the groups I was working with to stop publishing newsletters. So while we're here, just want to show you that the News Digest itself is a page, but it is a site page, meaning promoted state equals 0. So take a look at these attributes on this screen. Some of them, if you can look, everything after audience are some custom attributes, some for multilingual and some one that I was trying to see, can I have a news article that stops showing after a certain date? And of course you can. And I was just playing around with that. But what you're seeing here, that I have promoted state equals 0, and that means regular site page. Promoted state equals 2, and that means news. And so that's really a great way to find out what news pages, what news pages have I published on my site. You could create a view of the site pages library that only shows you news as well. One little trick I should talk about. People have often asked me, can I, try to move on. Let me go back to this News Digest. I wanted to show you, here's what the News Digest looks like. The one important thing to note about a News Digest, it's going to come from the person who creates the News Digest. So this is it's from me to me, but that is important to note. So if you create the news article, News Digest, and send it out, it'll come from you, not necessarily from SharePoint. So if everybody's already ignoring all your emails, well, they may still ignore this one as well. So what I was going to mention about, what was I going to mention? I'll come back to it about promoted state too. Anyways, okay, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. All right, so the one other thing I want to talk about is that we also now, rolling out to a tenant near you, have the ability to create news articles or any page in multiple languages. And while I'm not going to fully demo, this will be an entire presentation on multilingual pages, what I want to show you is that each page gets a translation. And you can see here's the page in English, here's the page in French. If I come into the site where my language on my Windows language is set to French, I will only see the French content. If I come into English, I will see the English content. So multilingual pages, I believe, it's close to being rolled out everywhere, and it is really, really cool. And I think it's going to unlock a lot of opportunities for a lot of organizations. So a few tips about news. Do the template thing. It's super important because one of the things you really want to do with news is help people write great articles. One way to do that is to put your training in the page template. So it's a really handy way to bring context and to the content right in place. Do me a favor, make sure you're displaying promoted state equals 2. It's a little tricky field because it is a modern field. And in order to see it, you have to click the plus, show hide, scroll to the bottom and show promoted state. Then you have to save the view, and then you have to go in to edit this current view to display version. I think you should also display version because if you look in my little example here, you can easily tell which pages are unpublished by looking at the version ID. So anything that ends in .0 is published, anything that ends in .1 or .anything else is unpublished. So these are my little handy tips for what you want to do when you create your first site to really help get back. Okay, a few more tips. Here's a few things to think about. You know, when you create a page in SharePoint and you add an image to that page, images get stored in the Site Assets library. I call the Site Assets library really page decoration. I don't ever want to see documents in the Site Assets library, so the best practice for adding documents to your site is add them to the document library first and then go grab them in quick links. If you upload a document in the course of adding a quick link, it will by default land in the Site Assets library, and then I promise you, you will never be able to find it again. So unless your document is in fact page decoration, you want to put your documents in the documents library so you can update it. The images that you add to your page, if you're adding them from an organization image library, you're actually getting a reference to the image because the image itself lives in a CDN. What's really nice about that is if you lose the rights to that image, you can replace the image with an image with the same URL or the same file name, and it'll automatically replace itself in every site where you use that image. So obviously this is going to be way more important for logos, which change on a fairly regular basis. But I worked in a client where they were allowed, all of their images had people of employees, and when people left, they were allowed to say, please remove all of my images. And before we had an org assets library, we actually had to hunt down this one woman. We called her the long-haired lady sitting in front of a desk. And we had to find all the places where we had used her because it was a really great image. Anyways, when you delete the page, the image, the folder that contains all the images on the page is not going to go away. And one of the reasons is that some other page might be referencing that image. So just so you know, those site assets folders, they never die. And that's kind of up to you to manage if you want to. Changing the title of the page does not affect the URL for the file name, but you can 100% change the URL for any page in your solution. When you change the URL for a page on your site, all the links to it are going to get automatically updated. So you really don't have to worry about changing the URL for a page. Most important tip about news, though, is you need to choose a landscape image as the primary image for your article. If you don't, what you'll have when people take those welcome to our company images and write a news article about it is you're going to see about that much of their face. So tell people, turn your phone this way when you take a picture of a person because the primary image for your article should be in landscape mode so that it looks good on all of the different places where we roll up images. All kinds of cool things you can do. If you're a news author, you can, of course, turn on page approval. That means I create the page, somebody else has to approve it. Schedule a post. I keep looking for that to show up in my tenant. You can promote a post via email. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about. One of the things that you can do is you can take any page and make it a news article. If you go into the page, the gray command bar at the top has a bunch of different actions, one of which is called promote. The one I don't want you to do is add it to the navigation. Only do that if it's really supposed to be in the navigation. But if you have a regular page that you want to promote to news, you can go ahead and use that feature. So, oh, I forgot to post this as news. You can do that after the fact. Getting it the other way, not as easy. And I will save that for a blog post. It is possible, but try not to do that. If you want it to be news, it's going to be news. What news readers can do, and this is really what you want to encourage, is they can comment on news. They can save for later. And if they save an article for later, they can take a look at it later, whether it's on the SharePoint start page or their mobile device. And so it's a great way to keep on top of things, but not necessarily have to read everything all at once. You can also filter news in the mobile app. So great, including sort of filtering for just organizational news. And of course, you can bring team news into Teams. So go to the channel, click plus, click on the SharePoint page tab, and just click on the news page. And when you save it, bingo, all your news articles show up right in the context of Teams. So super easy thing to do. A great way to a great purpose for news articles, ones that are truly designed to engage, is to write an article that describes an event. One of the things I often see people do is they take thousands of pictures on an event and they just want to drop it in a library. I'm going to just tell you that right now that every one of those images are probably not great images to describe the event. What you may want to do is choose a few really good ones, and of course every picture of Hannah is really good. Choose a few really good ones and add those images to an image gallery on your news page. You can add a title and a caption to news, and you can change the look of that image gallery so that the image and the title are more visible. And you can even make the gallery rotate. So really cool ways to do things. All right, so a few other things you can do. Drag and drop your image right onto the page canvas, and SharePoint will automatically give you an image web part and stick that image in there. You can crop and resize some of your images, and there's a few other great things that are, these really all apply to pages all up. All right, so we have about 25 minutes left, and now we now know about news, we know all the cool things we can do, and what I now want to talk about is how can we take our news articles from this to this. I mean, we want our news reader to be engaged and happy. Maybe she's not going to get the My Company tattoo on her shoulder, but we want her to be excited, and we want to make sure that we are writing great news articles. And that means we need to make sure that people who are writing news articles know how to create news that engages. Now, there's a lot of things we learned from the world of journalism about writing articles. And one of the best features of SharePoint is that we are democratizing who can create content on our intranet. But not every one of us knows how to create a great news post. We're not all comms professionals. So I'll give you a little hint that I learned from my comms professional colleagues, and that is write your content upside down. Now, it doesn't really mean that you have to stand on your head to write your content, but what it really means is that you need to think like a journalist and put the most important information at the top of your page. Remember that sobering slide that I had at the beginning that I basically told you is that people are not reading your news article, your new pages in general, and they're certainly not scrolling all the way to the bottom. What that means is in order to grab their attention, the good stuff has to be on top. So make sure you teach people that instead of having summary at the end, the way to make a great page, and especially a news article, is summary at the beginning, things that you need less of further down on the page. So most important content always goes on top. One of the reasons we love pages is that pages can be beautiful, and we can design our pages with sections and web parts to make them flow more easily on mobile. So one of the things, I'll just give you a little hint, when you're creating a news page, you 100% want to use sections, because the way that the response, I call it the smush, the way that the smush or responsiveness works on pages is that the engagement on mobile is going to take your content from section 1 to section 2 to section 3. So sections in order, and then columns in order within the sections from left to right. So if you want a particular image or collection of text to go with the text that is on the left of it, you need to make sure that the image is in the same section as the text, and that the next collection of text is in another section so that the wrapping works correctly. So use sections to break up the content, use background colors to make your content pop and to break up your content. And if you have a long page, well, first, try not to write long pages, but if you have to have a long page, make sure that you are breaking up your text using the H1, H2, and H3 header styles. I'm on a little accessibility rant, and May 21st was Global Accessibility Day, and one of the things I want you to think about is that don't skip sections. Use sections, because each section gives you an automatic anchor link, which can allow you to create kind of a table of contents at the top of your page. Use the sections in order, H1 before H2 before H3, because that helps someone who is using a screen reader jump from section to section. Remember, we skim and scan on the web. People who use a screen reader either have to consume all of that content, or jump between sections. So that's why we use headings, because they're recognized by screen readers. And if you use a heading 2 because you like the size of the font, you're actually going to make things more confusing. So if you want the font to be the size of heading 2, use text and then edit the font to be 24. And you will get, or 21, sorry, and you'll be approximately the size of an H2 without actually introducing a heading. So be kind. Use engaging web parts. If you're going to write a news article about an event, stick that countdown calendar in there. You can have a different background image. It's really cool, really fun. You want people to take an action, give them a call, use the call to action web part and tell people what you want them to do and give them a link to do it. Use the weather and time if it makes sense, use buttons, use quick links with different styles. And what people often forget is that you can make an image a link and add text overlaying that image, and that could become a hyperlink or a way of engaging people with content as well. So make sure the web parts are appropriate for your content. Don't use the latest and greatest just because you can. Sure, add flair to your pages, but unlike Office Space, we don't need 36 pieces of flair on everybody's vendors. When you're adding images, don't make me work for the images. Embed the image right on the page. And you can you take the stream web part, stick that stream image right on the page. If you make a link to a YouTube image, you can also embed the YouTube image on the page. So don't make your readers have to work for your content, especially when it's news, because the likelihood is they're kind of consuming on the go. And so we want to make it as easy as possible to both engage and get the message across. On any page, but especially news, highlight the words that you want to call my attention to in bold, use those subheadings, one idea per paragraph. That's one of the most important ways to make your content scannable. So give use a heading style to separate your paragraphs and keep the ideas simple so I can quickly scan your page and see what I want. If you need more, if your page needs to direct me to some additional content, you can use a hyperlink. But I want to give you what I'm going to call the Sue Hanley rule. Use hyperlinks for ancillary content, but the real question is, where should they go? Anywhere but under the word here. So not just for people who use screen readers, but for everyone. When you put your hyperlinks under the word here, what I have to do in my skimming and scanning mode is I have to read all the text before the here or all the text after the here to figure out where here is. And so the better thing to do is always put the hyperlink under the target so I can quickly scan and find my content. For that very same reason, we never ever use underlines on our web pages, because underline means hyperlink. So the danger here is when your page authors author in Word, and then they want to take the Word content and paste it into a SharePoint page. The formatting is going to be sticky. Unfortunately, they may be underlining in their Word document, and we don't really want them to do that on the web. So go back, look at your intranet, look at your news articles, look at those emails that you're writing, and go see if you are clicking here. And let's try and get rid of click here. The other thing we should write about, of course, is interesting topics. Now, not everything has to be about kittens and puppies, but, a picture of a cute little puppy or a kitten is probably going to draw attention to your article. So share an update about a project, announce a special event, recognize an accomplishment, write about things that people care about. And to get them interested, choose a really good title. It's okay to start your headline with a number. 5 things you need to know in order to work from home. Use sentence case. Don't capitalize every word. Try to make your title as friendly as possible. These are some great things that you can do to, again, write a catchy headline that's going to make me want to click on your article. The other thing we want to do, especially for the primary image associated with an article, is make sure it's relevant to the topic. Don't choose an image that has nothing to do with what I'm writing about, but make the image relate to that catchy title. If you have brand police and you want to make sure that you're using brand approved images, create an organizational assets site. This would be a special site collection in SharePoint. I recommend that it is its own site collection. You use PowerShell to give it the organization, each library, the organization assets superpowers. And then when you're looking in the image picker, you will see in the Your Organization tab all of the libraries that you've designated as being official organization assets library. So it's a great place to put logos. You know, the other thing that we found that we're trying to do really hard at one of my clients is leadership images and brand images. Those are the kind of things that people need all the time, and to have sort of this collection of leader images would be really, really helpful. Now, if you have some flexibility and you're allowed to use images, again, you want high quality images, you can use any one of these sources. They have great search engines and really that allow you to look for an image that really, really relates to your topic. And of course, the new Microsoft stock images. And again, because it's Accessibility Awareness Month, always add alt text to your images. One of the things you'll notice is when you add an image to a SharePoint page, the AI is going to give you a first shot at what is in this image. Take the 2 seconds it takes to add the alt text to the image. Here's the PowerShell if you want to create an org assets library. Another thing to think about when you're publishing news is where are you going to publish? In fact, where you want to publish is in the location that's going to get the broadest reach. So if you have the opportunity to publish at the main home site of your organization, obviously that will get your article the most attention. If you don't have the opportunity to publish there, then you probably want to think about publishing on a major hub, because people will tend to follow that hub. And when you're following a site, you know, the top 20 sites that you're following are going to show up in SharePoint Start. All those news articles will also show up on the mobile device. And the other thing you can do is if you want to promote an article, one of your articles, but you don't have the ability to publish on that target site, is you can ask the owner of that site to, you can send them a URL and ask them to post a news link to the article on your site. A news link posted on an individual site will show up as a news article that they are following, and that's another really great way to publish your news and get it visible. And then finally, as I said, just measuring views on your news article is probably not enough. What you want to do is measure actions that people are taking based on what you are talking about in news. So if you write a news article to promote an event, the metric isn't how many people read the article, it's how many people show up at the event. So actions speak louder than words when it comes to metrics. And just to kind of wrap it all up, to write articles that convert views into actions, write upside down, use web parts to break up your content, embed the videos, make sure that your content is scannable. For God's sakes, write about something people care about, have a great title, relevant images, think about where you're publishing, because that may help your news article get seen, and measure what really, really matters in your for your news. So that's all I have, and I'm basically about 2 minutes away. Hopefully we've got some questions that I can answer.
We do.
Okay. Do you want to tell me what's important? Is there a way here? Yeah.
Yeah, I can. I've been thumbing through them. Here's one that I think is relevant. If you filter news based on a site column from select sites, how can you ensure all the sites have the same column and same values?
So that is a great question. So one way to have the same values is to use managed metadata, because then you are at the enterprise level. So that way you can control the values. Now you want to worry about the same column. That is a little bit trickier. So one thing, there's a couple of different ways to do that. You can create the column, point it to the managed metadata on all of your sites, and then map it to a managed property and then filter on the managed property. Or you can use a site script to copy those columns from a site design from site to site. And then those columns actually are going to share the same GUID, and you should be able to roll up content, even if that content isn't based on that same property across multiple sites. I'll tell you, I haven't tried that. I've done the mapping, the schema mapping a lot. Haven't tried the other one, but I believe that should work. But again, if you can absolutely filter for words in content and title. And if none of those work, the best way to roll up content is actually highlighted content, because you have the camel queries and the KQL queries that you actually can embed in that filter. Here's a good question. Sorry, is there a way to repost an older news article that's already rolled off the web parts? You'd probably have to create that again, copy the page. So I would do new, copy page, and promote it again. News is published based on first published date, and that is not an editable, out of the box editable field. And so once you roll off, you're off. But I haven't ever tried promoting an article again, but I believe you can easily make a copy of that article to get it there. Or, oh, I forgot about this one, pin it. So put it in a location where you want it to see so that it's sticky for a while. And that may be actually the easiest way to do it. Let's see. Would you recommend to filter more and keep one news library versus having separate news libraries for different topics? I actually have an answer to that question. Every topic in your organization, every unit of work should have their own communication site, so that you can control who's allowed to publish content to that site. It is challenging. It is technically possible, but not a great idea to add permissions to the site pages library. So what I totally recommend that you do is that you give each topic its own site or microsite, and then use the roll-up capabilities to pull that content together on a more visible or prominent page. So I would prefer to keep the sites separated so you can manage permissions according to who has both knowledge and responsibility for that content, and then roll things up in that way. All right. Any other good ones that we should be answering? All right, well, thank you very much. My time is up. Here's different ways to contact me. And please, please, if you get a chance, send me some feedback about both the presentation and the event. And I look forward to seeing everybody in real life at some time soon.